Hey, sports fans, my name's Connor Bennion. You may know me from the Unbiased podcast, Mr. Unbiased. The host would be myself, Connor Bennion. I'm starting a new podcast, and it was really rather spur of the moment. That's why I went with this microphone. It's a lot easier to set up. And I know you're used to seeing me enter with some theme music. I'm just going to hop right in. This is the Babbling Bennion podcast. And I decided to start this podcast on top of my Unbiased podcast, which always airs every Tuesday, because this past week, for anybody that watched my show knows that I went to the BYU Notre Dame game, football game in Las Vegas. And that kind of sets the precedent for this show. I was so enraged, and I kind of wanted to start this podcast as an opportunity to really express what I'm feeling without the unbiased cage, if you will. This is going to be my pure, raw opinion, and it's going to come across as biased, but I'm going to try and show you why I feel the way I do. And so these episodes are going to be a lot shorter, but they're also going to be more common. These are not going to, I'm not going to review consistently. They're going to be teams that I probably follow, is probably who I'm going to get upset about. I'll talk about Alabama. That's why I've got the flag in the back. The whole thing is sparked by the BYU Notre Dame game, which is what I will start with. But just a couple other topics that I wanted to rant about personally that you can completely disagree with, because it's not going to be an unbiased opinion. That's why I'm calling this the Babbling Bennion, because I'm just going to go. I'm just going to say what I feel, and you can agree or disagree. I'd love to see your comments, love to see your opinions. But to start the podcast, again, what really fueled this as I had a long drive back from Las Vegas on Saturday night. What really fuels this is the fact that September 4th, 2021, let me give you a date. September 4th, 2021, the BYU Cougars faced the Arizona Wildcats for the Las Vegas Kickoff Classic in Allegiant Stadium. I was also at that game. And it was that day that BYU announced and confirmed that they would be playing Notre Dame the following season in Allegiant Stadium. It was that day that I should have understood and accepted the fact that BYU would be Notre Dame's sacrificial lamb. That BYU would be a pig going to slaughter. BYU was not going to be allowed to win that game Saturday night. And hear me out. Again, there's the biased opinion, obviously. I totally get that. But the reason I make that mention is because give me a list of schools, and in case, and I also need to be corrected if I'm wrong. So if somebody has more information on this, please share it with me. But my understanding was back in 2013, 2014, the BYU Cougars played in South Bend, Indiana, home of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, for 2 games. Back-to-back seasons, they went to Notre Dame. BYU and Notre Dame signed a home-and-home series where both teams would play 2 home games. Notre Dame got their 2 road games. Notre Dame owes BYU 2 games in LaVell Edwards Stadium in Provo, Utah. And what did Notre Dame do? They told BYU, we're not going to Provo. We aren't. We just are not going to go play you in Provo. But we'll play you on a neutral field in Las Vegas, which is closer to you, but it's going to be part of our Shamrock series, where we get 85% of the tickets. And as a fan who was there, Notre Dame gets the majority of the tickets. They get to control the PA system, which plays the music, which announces it's third down, get loud, really controls and makes it a home environment. We get to control what broadcasted network, what network it is broadcasted on, what time the game starts. They also got to decide, of course, during the intermissions, like the timeouts, they had to decide who was going to speak and what the activities were, all Notre Dame. The field was decorated with the Shamrock series. And as my cousin brought up, which was really interesting, was they had a commemorative coin. The heads was the Notre Dame logo, and the tails was the Shamrock series logo. And they said, if it lands on heads, Notre Dame wins the toss. If it lands on tails, Shamrock series, BYU wins the toss. But that's not how a coin toss works. A coin toss works. You determine a home team. You determine an away team. Super Bowl. Super Bowls are in a neutral location, but there is a designated home and a designated away team. Why? because somebody has to call the coin toss. You can't just say your heads, your tails, and this is the winner or the loser. What if a team won the toss and wanted to defer? What if they wanted to receive? The Shamrock Series was a sham. BYU was the pig to slaughter. BYU was Notre Dame's sacrificial lamb. As a fan who was there on Saturday night and in an electric atmosphere, a game that BYU was they just had such an uphill climb. It didn't get easier when Notre Dame, who owes BYU 2 games in Provo, ekes out an 8-point win, in the which BYU was atrocious. Under 100 total yards offensively in the first half, and BYU still only loses by 1 possession. Play that game in Provo. Play that game in Provo, and you tell me how it goes. I'm not saying BYU wins. I'm not saying BYU loses. What I am saying is that game is drastically different if you play in Provo. Notre Dame owes BYU 2 games in Provo. And what did they do? They said, we'll give you 1 on a neutral field where we control everything except the location, which they practically did. So that's part 1 of the Babbling Bennion podcast. Again, totally biased view, but as someone who was there Saturday night, not understanding why the thousands of season ticket holders weren't sitting in their seats in Provo, Utah, in Lavelle Edwards Stadium, I can't help but question what exactly, also, to continue a rant, has Notre Dame done? And I know the argument is they've been in the college football playoff twice. I get that. In both times, they've forgotten to show up. And I shouldn't say forgot to show up. They proved that they weren't supposed to be there. Notre Dame has not done anything this century. So why on earth are they controlling a home and home series by giving BYU an opportunity to play in Las Vegas? I will say BYU obviously could have told Notre Dame, no, we're just not going to play you. But they were not afraid of Notre Dame, and they were willing to go and travel. The crowd traveled as well. The BYU crowd traveled well as well. Again, an electric atmosphere, a great game, one that I believe deserved to be in Provo. So again, that's my biased view. I'm a BYU fan. It was hard to see them lose. You could say I'm a sore loser, but give me a list of teams who sign a home and home series with another team and then get 1 neutral field site where the other team controls all of the details. You give me a list of those colleges and then come talk to me. So that is my opening BYU rant. Next rant is the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's a really simple rant. It's the fact that the College Football Committee that ranks the AP Top 25 has no idea what they're talking about, and they're incredibly inconsistent. As an Alabama fan, Alabama went from 1 this past week, dropping down to 3. And I know your argument. I'm hearing your argument. Alabama, number 1 overall, beat Texas A&M unranked 24-20, had a game-winning touchdown batted away on the last play of the game where a lot of people were calling pass interference, whole 9 yards. I'm hearing you. But here's my question. Why wasn't Alabama given the credit and the recognition that their defending Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in Bryce Young was out with injury? You give me a list of teams who lose their starting quarterback, who is the Heisman winner or Heisman equivalent, and they play an SEC school like Texas A&M, and they have more impressive performance. Give me a list. Ohio State, C.J. Stroud. Take him out and they have to play someone as talented as Texas A&M. I'm not saying they're going to only win by 4 on a last-second play. But it's very possible. Clemson with DJ. I think, again, take him out, force a player who has very limited experience, and put him against a team like Texas A&M, that talented, It's going to be a major uphill climb. Michigan, USC, all of these very talented rosters missing their star quarterback. Give me a list of teams who don't make a huge downgrade from losing their starting quarterback. The AP Top 25, as usual, absolute joke. As usual. I will admit, is part of that bleeding over from the fact that BYU dropped out of the rankings with their Notre Dame loss. Kind of going back to the Cougars, I'm going to say yes. And I say this for this reason. Why is it that teams can be recognized, they can be loved, they can be adored, they can be worshipped, and yet when something doesn't go their way, it's just a down season for Notre Dame. You know, they lost to a really good Ohio State team, which they did. They lost to Marshall. They're in the dumps. This Notre Dame team couldn't win against I don't even know how to describe what they can't win. But Notre Dame's Notre Dame. Notre Dame is Notre Dame. BYU loses from 16th to unranked against the mighty Notre Dame. There's no recognition that it's Notre Dame. All that matters is you lose. Same thing, very similar, I felt. Again, hopefully this kind of helps unbiased a little bit. With Utah. Utah drops a 10-point loss to number 18 UCLA, and they drop out of the top 20. How powerful are your rankings? They dropped over 10 spots for losing a game in the Rose Bowl to UCLA, who's a top 20 team. The AP Top 25 is an absolute joke. And if you don't agree, then I'd love to hear your opinion, because I need to be educated. Don't get me wrong. A lot of these rants and these videos are going to be me babbling and also sharing an incredibly biased view. And I hope that you can educate me. The third and final point that I will bring on, and this has nothing to do with any teams that I like. It's actually a team I quite despise. It's the Los Angeles Chargers. And I was actually correct on my pick of picking them over Cleveland. So you'd think I'd be happy, but I wanted to review the fact that while the Chargers were victorious this past weekend, they should have, and I don't like to play the should have game. They very easily could have lost due to one of the stupidest decisions by Brandon Staley by going for, I believe it was a 4th and 2 at their own 47. And you know the reason is the analytics told me. Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans, analytics is the most overrated term in all of sports for the reason that Brandon Staley worships at the feet of analytics. And what has Los Angeles done under the mighty Brandon Staley? How many playoff appearances? How many playoff wins? Oh, none. Zero. Zilch. Analytics make you miss the playoffs. You know what it is? It's you can't see it. It's the football gut. It's the football brain. It's knowing what needs to be done to win a football game. You know who has the football gut, who says, screw the analytics? Sorry for my language. I don't know if that counts. Anyway, do you know who says out the window with the analytics? Bill Belichick. 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach. Andy Reid just won the Super Bowl with Kansas City 3 years ago. 4 straight AFC championship games hosted. If I recall correctly, the most wins in the NFL since Patrick Mahomes entered the league. Football gut, football brain. Analytics gets you out of the playoffs before you even make it. That is my probably concluding rant. It drove me crazy that the analytics told Brandon Staley, go for this 4th down. They didn't get it, and the analytics got lucky. To all sports fans, if you come at me and say, the analytics and the statistics say, I will say, you know what they say? I'll take this game, but I'll miss the playoffs. That's my rant to finish on the Babbling Bennion. I've been your host, Connor Bennion, and I hope you enjoyed it. Again, these videos are going to be a lot more, I won't say a lot more common. That I would assume they'll be more than once a week. They may be less than once a week, just purely because I was just so driven because of how bothered I was by the BYU game. And the dropping of Alabama and the ridiculous analytics. So who knows? With the NFL continuing, with the NBA starting soon, with the NCAA football going on, of course, college basketball is right around the corner. NHL is just starting. The MLS playoffs for the Real Salt Lake play are on Sunday. And then for my New York Yankees, they start tomorrow against Cleveland. There'll be plenty to talk about, but I can't promise that these episodes, I definitely am not going to do them on a certain certain day basis. Like today's Monday, the next episode may be Thursday, it may be Saturday, it may be Sunday, it may be next Wednesday. I don't know. But I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment, like, and subscribe. And then again, if you like the content here, please check out my other podcast, Unbiased, where I review sports in general and try to give an unbiased view. Thank you again for joining. Again, I've been your host, Connor Bennion. Maybe I'll have a little jingle. Maybe I won't. Maybe there'll be a flag. Maybe there won't. We'll see what happens as it keeps going. Thank you and have a great rest of your day. Monday Night Football coming up very briefly for the time that I'm recording this. It's just before 6 o'clock. As you can tell, for me, go Chiefs.